I live in a small wooded area in a small city in Kentucky. A couple of weeks ago, in November, I was taking my dog outside. My dog's legs were going out as she couldn't walk very well, as she was old and was sadly put down this week. So she's taking a while. I stand out there with her to make sure she's okay. She liked to go into the backyard to do her business. When I hear footsteps in the woods, I assume it's a deer or something and just tell my dog to hurry up. The steps sounded like they were all over the place. Close, then far, then close again. Once they sounded really close. I got my dog inside. Since I'm an idiot, I went back outside to check it out. Again, I hear footsteps. And again, they're all over. Then it was suddenly really close. And I saw a parting in the bushes. And it was huge. I ran to my house as fast as I could. I think I may have even sprained my ankle while doing so. And I didn't look back. The next day, I'm out there with my dog again. This time, I heard a sort of whispering from all around me in the woods. Once again, I told my dog to hurry up and got the hell inside. Maybe this part is unrelated, but Tuesday this week, an old man in a bright orange jacket and a cane and a hat was walking up and down my road, back and forth, for about 4 hours. By the way, it's like 20 degrees outside that day. As soon as I pointed out to my mum, he was gone. I never saw him again. My house has cameras, so I went back through the footage to see if I could find videos of him. You know what I found? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Despite me seeing him on our cameras multiple times. Don't know what it is. I've just had a lot of strange encounters since the day I took my dog out, and it's freaking me out. To explain why seeing the guy was really weird, I don't really live in a neighbourhood, and I don't have any neighbours actually. There's my house, then road. And a lot of people have died on my road, so it's not a place people walk on. There's no sidewalk or anything, just road, then woods. So seeing some guy walking on it for hours was really strange, and not at all something I've seen while living there. Might not be related, and I might be paranoid or on edge. Just a lot of strange occurrences since the first one, and something isn't right. I'm a 24-year-old female and live in South Jersey, about 45 minutes from the coast. I hate being in crowds, so I'll never go to the popular beach cities in the summer. But during the off seasons, I like to drive down and have a nice quiet walk along the boardwalk. I decided to do this yesterday and asked my siblings if they wanted to come with. They declined since we're currently experiencing a cold snap, so I ended up going by myself. The walk was great for the first half hour or so. I had the beach entirely to myself and was walking along the shoreline, listening to music. After I passed one of the pavilions, I went out onto a stone jetty to watch the ocean. Then I headed back onto the beach. As I was walking back towards the pavilion, I turned around, as I sometimes do, to check my surroundings. There was a man in black walking fairly close behind me. It was about 5 o'clock now and pretty dark, but there are plenty of buildings up on the boardwalk that have lights and security cameras. So I told myself to get back up on the boardwalk as the beach definitely didn't feel safe anymore. When I reached the boardwalk, I took a minute to look out at the beach to see if the man was following me. As I was looking for him, I saw movement to my left. There was a dude on an electric scooter on the boardwalk just a few yards behind me. Don't know if it was the same guy or not, but I didn't see anyone on the beach. The dude on the scooter was just standing there. I wasn't looking directly at him, so I don't know what he was doing. He could have been innocently scrolling through his playlist for all I know. But it all felt very weird, so I just stood there for a minute. I didn't want him behind me. Eventually, he powered up his scooter and rode past me. He then stopped in front of the pavilion, and since I was headed in the same direction, I had an oh shit moment, where I had to walk right past him. I always carry a knife with me when I'm out walking, as I'm short and definitely not athletic. So as I heard the scooter revving up behind me, I took my knife out of my pocket to have it ready in case it went down. Fortunately, scooter guy rode right past me. and I kept checking behind me as I was walking to make sure nobody else was following me. After a few more blocks, I got off the boardwalk and back into the street, figuring if Scooter Dude came around again, he would find it more difficult to track me through the city streets rather than across the straight, empty plain of the boardwalk. I didn't see him again all evening and got safely to my car, but it was definitely surreal walking through an abandoned vacation town in the freezing cold on Christmas Eve, feeling as though I was being followed. Maybe he even saw me when I was out on the jetty and was planning on creeping up on me then. Or, of course, he could have been a fellow weirdo who just happens to enjoy a lonely twilight stroll on the beach. Still, I was definitely creeped out. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. In many rural areas of the American West, cutting firewood in national forests is a necessary chore if you want a warm house through the winter. Our home in mountainous central Idaho was no exception. It was normal for my dad to pick me and my brothers up after school and head into the mountains for an afternoon of firewood gathering. My dad would fell the dead trees, then saw them into chunks. My brothers and I had the task of rolling the wood to the truck and loading it. We would continue this assembly line process until we had a truckload of wood, usually before nightfall. Hot, sweaty, and exhausted, we would pile into the truck cab and make our way down the mountain. At home, the next day, we would unload and split the wood and stack it into neat little rows. This process was repeated until we had a winter's worth of fuel for a house, our grandma's cabin, and any extra for elderly neighbours. This particular afternoon, we decided to try a different logging road on the other side of the valley. This was well outside our familiar logging area. No real reason for the change, but my dad said he wanted a change of scenery. This logging road hadn't been maintained in some time. Large rocks and fallen branches littered the path. My brothers and I had to walk out in front, pushing rocks and wood out of the way as my dad lurched the truck up the switchbacks. Yard by yard, we slowly made our way up the mountain. That hike was physically brutal as we ascended the mountain and got farther into the trees. This odd feeling started to set in. I wasn't sure if it was the exhaustion from the hike or something more. There was electricity in the air, like the whole mountain was buzzing at a wavelength just below my senses. In some odd way, it felt like the mountain knew we were there, and it wasn't welcome to the fact. I wanted to say something to my brothers, but before I opened my mouth, my younger brother said, "Does anyone else feel like we're not welcome here?" My older brother and I stopped in our tracks and looked back at him. Both of us nodded in agreement. This moment was broken by my dad honking and monitoring us to continue clearing the path. Reluctantly, we pushed forward to a small clearing in the woods, where we finally stopped the truck. My dad, oblivious to our apprehension, or simply choosing to ignore it, grabbed his saw and went to work. As the wood was felled and loaded, I couldn't shake this ominous feeling enveloping me like a dark shroud. I noticed my brothers were taking occasional glances over their shoulders as we worked. Everyone but my dad, it seemed, was on edge. The sun nestled down into the trees and twilight began to set in. As the light drained from the sky, my anxiety only intensified. It wasn't until my dad unexpectedly told us to load up that a wave of relief flooded over me. I could see the tension in my brothers melt away as well. The truck wasn't fully loaded, an oddity. Getting a half load was a waste, according to my dad. We would sometimes work into the dark just to make sure the truck was full. But tonight, he seemed eager to head home. With everything loaded, we started down the road. Although dead tired, everyone seemed to be in a much lighter mood. We were chatting and cracking jokes while trying to blow off steam from the afternoon. We were almost out of the tree line and into the valley desert. Going down the switchbacks, you want to be careful, especially with a load, even if it was half that. A brown blur jumped up from down the slope side of the switchback. "Shit!" was the only word that came out of my dad's mouth as he slammed on the brakes. Loaded with wood and travelling downhill, There was no way to avoid smashing into the blur. The truck finally ground to a standstill. The four of us peered through the windshield, nobody saying a word. Illuminated in the yellow glow of our headlights was a crumpled body of deer. Grumbling and cursing the deer's existence, my dad exited the truck to investigate. Doing as they were told, my brothers stayed put in the truck. I didn't listen, following close behind my dad. The truck was fine. We hadn't been travelling fast when we smacked the deer, just some hair and blood in the grill guard. Hitting a deer really wasn't that unusual. The mountains were full of them. What was unusual was that the deer dropped so quickly. At faster speeds, deer could still be upright and sprinting away to die into the woods after a collision. That last burst of an adrenaline dump, this one, fell over like a rag doll. Before even approaching the carcass, a deep, foul smell hit us. Deer smell bad when they're alive, but this was on a whole nother level. It was the smell of decay and rot. My stomach began to turn as we got closer. My nostrils were burning. Coming up on the deer, it was clearly dead. Really, really dead. The stench was so overwhelming, my eyes were watering. The body was a true horror scene. The deer's eyes were gone, replaced with sunken, hollow hole. As if to overcompensate for the absence, the tongue was swollen and black as coal. It could not be contained and hung out the side of its mouth. The underbelly was split open. Entrails and offal spilled into the dirt. In the dim headlights, it looked as though the deer's fur and viscera were moving. Holding my breath, I bent down for a closer look, and my heart stopped. The deer, inside and out, was covered in maggots. It was dead all right, but our truck didn't kill it. Clearly, it had been dead for days, if not weeks. I backed away, retching. That electric anxiety came screaming back. My dad was always the quiet, stoic type, but right now, even in the dim headlights of the truck, I could see the abject horror on his face. His gaze wasn't on the deer, but focused down the mountain. Poorly masking the fear in his voice, he told me firmly to walk back to the truck and get inside. I obeyed without objection. As I grabbed the door handle, a loud shriek came out of the trees. Branches were shattering and breaking. Something was heading up the slope towards us. I slammed my door closed just as my dad reached the truck. Before his door was shut, he pressed on the accelerator. The truck launched forward, sending us over the deer carcass and racing downhill, with mine and my brothers yelling. It was hard to tell if the shrieking was following us. Our truck popped out of the tree line and into the desert sagebrush. Once out of the woods, everything quietened down. We were left with only the rumble of the engine and wind through the half-open windows. Pulling into our property, the truck came to a stop. We sat in silence. No one moved to leave the truck. Everyone started talking at once. We all had questions. What was the screaming? How does a dead deer jump uphill in front of a truck? There was no way the truck killed it. Dad just shook his head and motioned for us to quiet down. That deer was dead when we hit it. It didn't jump out in front of us. It was thrown at us. We stared at him. He explained that all day up on the mountain, he had felt uneasy. Not wanting to worry us boys, he kept it to himself. He described it like walking into a stranger's living room while they were upstairs asleep. That feeling never left him, and as twilight came, he happened to catch a shadow in the corner of his eye, not far into the woods, and saw figures moving from tree to tree. He couldn't focus on them long enough for a good look before they dodged behind trees. His stomach dropped. Working hard to keep his composure, he hurried us to the truck to leave. It was after hitting the deer and discovering it was long dead that my dad pieced together what was happening. Something threw that deer to get us to stop. Before the shrieking began, he could hear something moving in the darkness beyond the road. It was a trap. Running back to the truck, could have started an ambush or triggered a prey drive. So we walked back to the truck. The second we were inside, he drove that truck downhill with no intention of stopping for anyone or anything. That feeling of electricity didn't disappear until we hit the county highway. My brothers and I never saw anything as we drove away, but those screams from the forest will never leave my mind. We didn't gather firewood for the rest of the season. For the first time in his life, my dad just bought what we needed. And although we started to gather wood again the next season, we've never been back up that particular mountain. The Forest Service has permanently closed and reclaimed that road. The only way back up into those woods is a long hike. One I'm not interested in ever taking again. Whatever was on that mountain, whatever threw that deer carcass, whatever chased us out of those woods, it did not want us there. It wanted us gone. Or worse, it wanted us dead. I'm a logger in northern British Columbia, Canada. I'm an avid hunter and have spent many nights hunting alone. That being said, quite a few years ago, I was working on a broken down skidder in the dark after everyone on the logging block was gone, changing a blown hydraulic hose under the cab when I felt like I was being watched. The feeling continued to get worse and worse, so I was on edge and continued to work on replacing the blown hose. Every trip for tools to the service truck and back, I would scan for eyes in the nearby tree line about 25 metres away with my flashlight. Nothing. I continued to work on the pain in the ass hose that you literally have to dive your head and upper body under the cab to reach, and so your legs are stuck up in the air and feeling vulnerable. The feeling of being watched gets more intense. All the hairs on my neck are standing and I hear a two-tone whistle from far away. Almost as if it was wind. It was far away, but it was flat and calm that day. Also, there was about 6 inches of fresh snow on the ground. I pushed myself out from under the skidder and looked around quietly with a flashlight for eyes in the tree line and down the road. Nothing. I had one side of the hose fitting to remove still, and it was the easier side and higher up, so I wasn't arse over tea kettle removing it. I put my head back under the cab and quickly began to spin the fitting loose. The feeling of being watched was so bad, every hair on my body was standing. And then I hear the same two-tone whistle, very loudly, in the tree line, directly behind me. I had the hose off at the exact same time, so I whipped myself out from under the cab and turned, ready to throw down with a wrench in my hand, yelling, "All right, where the fuck are ya?" No one there. No tracks, no eyes, no wind. Nothing. The flashlight I had was more of a small floodlight for working on repair stuff, so it didn't light up inside the trees. The next day, it had snowed another 6 inches or so, but I went and hiked the tree line with my 12 gauge, and I was ready to go. No tracks that I could see, no perches on the trees where snow had been pushed off, if it was a bird. Nothing. I actually should have mentioned that this was over some 30 kilometres into the middle of nowhere, in the middle of winter, at about 7 p.m, so it was pitch black outside.